according to St. John.
Glory to thee, O Lord, glory to thee.
Let us attend. At that time, when Jesus was passing, he saw a man blind from his birth. And his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, it was not this man's sin or his parents, but that the works of God might be made manifest in him. I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night comes when no man can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. And as he said this, he spat on the ground and made a clay of spittle and anointed the man's eyes with the clay, saying to him, go wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. And so he went and washed and came back seeing. The neighbors of those who had seen him before as a beggar said, is this not the man who used to sit and beg? Some said, Steve, would you adjust the light? It's flashing.
Yes, Father.
Good, thank you. Thanks. Isn't this not the man who used to sit and beg? Some said, is he? Others said, no, but he is like him. He said, I am the man. They said to him, then how were your eyes opened? He answered, the man called Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes and said to me, go to Siloam and wash. And so I went and washed and received my sight. They said to him, where is he? And he said, I do not know. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the clay and opened the eyes. The Pharisees again asked him how he had received his sight. He said to them, he put clay on my eyes, and I washed, and I see. Some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God. He does not keep the Sabbath. But others said, how can a man who is a sinner do such signs? There was a division among them. So again they said to the blind man, what do you say about him since he has opened your eyes? He said, he is a prophet. The Jews did not believe that he had been blind and received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received the sight and asked him, is this your son, who you say was born blind? Then now how does he see? The parents answered, we know that this is our son, that he was not born blind, but how he sees now we do not know, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him, he is of age, he will speak for himself. His parents said this because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed if anyone should confess him to be the Christ, he was to be put out of the synagogue. Therefore the parents said, he is of age, ask him. So for the second time they called the man who had been born blind and said to him, give God the praise, we know this man is a sinner. He answered, whether he is a sinner I do not know. One thing I know, though, that I was blind, now I see. They said to him, what did he do to you? How did he open his eyes? He answered them, I have told you already, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear again? Do you want to become his disciples? They reviled him, saying, you are his disciple, we are the disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but for this man we do not know where he comes from. The man answered, why, this is a marvel. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, God listen to him. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a man who was born blind. If this man was not from God, he could do nothing. They answered him, you were born in utter sin, and you would teach us, and they cast him out. When Jesus heard that they had cast him out, having found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of God? He said, answered, who is he that I may believe in him? Jesus said to him, you have seen him, and it's he who speaks to you. He said, Lord, I believe, and he worshipped him.
Glory to thee, O Lord, glory to thee.
Please be seated. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, now and ever, and to ages of ages. Amen. This is an amazing story. He knows that the man that anointed his eyes was Jesus, but he really doesn't know who he is. And yet when Jesus told him, go to the pool of Siloam and wash your eyes and you'll see, the man is walking a huge distance from the temple courtyard to the pool of Siloam, which was on the edge of the city of Jerusalem. And you can see the scene. Here is this man who's been a beggar that people derided, and he's got mud on his eyes. And I assume he had a touching stick, like you see blind people today. They have a really long, small cane that they touch in front of them to make sure there's nothing in their way. And I assume that those kind of canes are not a new custom, that blind people invented those a long time ago to make sure when they walk there was nothing in the way. So here's this blind man stumbling and walking this huge distance across the city of Jerusalem with mud on his eyes, totally believing this man that he really doesn't know, who told him if he goes and washes his eyes, he'll see. That's the first miracle, that he believed Jesus enough to do that. Incredible. And then the story gets complicated. He washes his eyes and he sees. Now remember the problem here. Jesus has healed other people who were blind, who went blind during their life. But in the diagnostic manual of the day, of his day, the belief was that someone who was congenitally blind, that is born blind, was so damaged that it could not possibly be fixed in any way. And so this becomes an astounding miracle that this man who was blind from birth was granted his sight. And of course what happens is the Pharisees have to get involved. And so they call the man in and he tells them what happened. And of course they get hung up on this little tiny rule about you can't work and make clay on Sunday to put on the eyes. So it's obviously at fault, and we got to find a way to show that this didn't happen. This huge, incredible miracle. So they call the parents in, and the first shot is, well, let's see if maybe it's a lie that he wasn't born from birth. Or maybe it wasn't their son, it was somebody else. And of course the parents affirm it was their son, and he was blind from birth, and he sees. When it comes to how he sees, they wimped out. Oh, we don't know. Ask him, he's of age. They were afraid of being kicked out of the synagogue, so they threw their son into the conflict. Ask him. Let him do the conflictual thing. So they call him back. And when they call him back in, they start to examine him again. And he said, I told you before, what's your problem? Why do I got to tell you again? You want to become his disciples? And of course, then they get in sin. We're disciples of Moses. You're a disciple of this man. You're a sinner. He's a sinner because he did this awful thing of making clay on a Sunday or Sabbath. And so they kick him out. Now, what's going on here is this amazing thing. As the process goes on, he begins to see more spiritually about who Jesus really is and the power of what happened. And the Pharisees, who are supposed to be experts in spiritual life in the day, get blinder and blinder as the process goes on. They're nitpicking to try to find a way to undo this incredible miracle. That's why they call the parents in. Parents were afraid. They threw the son into the fire and so on. And they get really mad when he holds them accountable, because his eyes are increasingly open about the power of what happened. And how can a sinner possibly do this? Because God doesn't listen to a sinner. God listens to somebody who is righteous. So therefore this man must be righteous. He must be a prophet. And of course he encounters Jesus again, and Jesus tells him who he really is, and he falls down to worship Jesus. It's an amazing story. And I wonder about us. If powerful miracles begin to occur before our face, would we nitpick? Or would we fall down on our knees and worship God? Would be the Pharisees with the petty rules, because we own the church. We're here every Sunday, we take communion, we go to confession, we do all the righteous things. Or would we, like the blind man, increasingly see not only materially and physically, but would we increasingly see spiritually the power of the living God. And that's what the issue is for us. Does our spiritual sight grow as we stand in the presence of the living God, particularly in the divine liturgy, where God is present and we become present in defense of our salvation? The crucifixion, which happens once in time, that goes on forever. The resurrection that happens once in time, that goes on forever in eternity, and the ascension. And so here we stand in the face of all this power, but do we simply have a kind of automatic, just go through the motions thing, or do we fall down on our knees before the sight of the living God? In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, now and ever.